We hear a lot of athletes on the male side expressing frustrations that they feel like if they are all natural, that they're not one of the men. Do you get that same sense in the women's division as well, or do you feel like there's more natural athletes in the women's?
I would like to think that there's more natural athletes in the women's division than the men's division. It's so hard to tell with the females, to be honest, because the females are not going to be abusing things like TRT or, growth hormones, because it's going to be really obvious if, they're starting to lose their hair and they're walking out, with traps for days and things like it's going to be really clear. Yeah. I think for the females, the biggest thing is using things that aid in recovery, and then they go unnoticed. And I think it's so hard to tell with the females. I truly hope that it's not as big of a problem in the female division.
Welcome back to the BJJ Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Ford. My guest today is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's a two-time ADCC champion, a two-time ADCC Oceania and Asian Trials winner. She's also a Pan Am's champion and a Europeans No-Gi champion. She also holds super fight victories at Grapple Fest and Who's Number One, and she's a brown belt world champion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be joined today by Adele Daddy Fornarino. How are you today, Adele?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Adele, it's an honor to have you here. Your performance at ADCC was legendary, and you've really blown up on the scene. You've brought lots of excitement with you. You're a submission machine. It's been super cool watching your career unfold, and I'm really looking forward to diving into your story. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you very, very much. That's a hell of an introduction.
Also, I wanted to give you extra points. Guys, there's a 13-hour time difference between Adele and I, so she's doing a late night interview here for us. It's really appreciated. I appreciate you drinking your coffee and being ready to be here today, because it's great to have you.
Like I was saying, the coffee here in Australia is pretty good, so I'm happy to be having an extra one today. But I'm a night owl, so if you know me, then I'm a bit of a degenerate, and I'm staying up until all hours of the night anyway. If I'm not on a podcast, then I'm playing video games until all hours of the night. That's the reality.
Nice, that's awesome. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to your coach, Jake O'Driscoll, who's a longtime listener of the show, for putting us in contact. Jake, thank you very much for this. Adele, tell us about where you're from originally and what life was like before you found jiu-jitsu.
So I'm born and bred in Melbourne, Australia. So I always spent my time here. Before jiu-jitsu, just really athletic, really enjoyed sports. I'm in a very privileged situation where no matter what sport I wanted to pursue, my parents were really encouraging of it. When I was really young, any sport that my brother did is the sport that I wanted to do. So if he did football, like Australian football, like AFL, then I wanted to do football. If he did soccer, then I wanted to do soccer. If he did tennis, then I wanted to do tennis. But jiu-jitsu was the first thing that I did where I kind of stepped away from that and did a sport that I pursued by myself. So my brother's actually never done jiu-jitsu or any martial art for that matter. So jiu-jitsu was the first one where I kind of went solo on it and just fell in love with it. But just always athletic, always just incredibly competitive. I think I've always just had that in me where I just wanted to win everything, whether that was video games or sports or board games or whatever it's going to be, just insanely competitive.
So with that being said, how did you find jiu-jitsu then? Did your brother start jiu-jitsu first and you followed, or was that something you started on your own?
No, I actually started it on my own. So when I was around about 10 years old, I decided that I wanted to be a police officer. I decided that was going to be my career choice, something that was outdoors, something that was, a little bit exciting. My parents both came from corporate backgrounds, so they both worked in corporate life, so desk jobs and behind computers. And I decided that wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wanted to go in the complete opposite direction and be outside all day and running around and running amok all day. So I'm like, okay, police officer was what kind of naturally came next. Then decided that martial arts would be really helpful in that, and just Googled the closest martial arts center to me, and it happened to be jiu-jitsu, and it happened to be a really good coach that had a really good kids program and kept my interest and was really engaging. And I think just everything was sheer luck at the very start. It just happened to work out in the best possible way for me.
So that could have easily been Kung Fu. Like you could have ended up just being a Kung Fu practitioner.
100%.
And never have won an ADCC, never become a world champion.
100%. There was no one that I knew in my close circle that had ever talked about jiu-jitsu or talked about martial arts for that matter, but there was no one I knew that ever did any kind of martial arts or any kind of jiu-jitsu. So it was just luck. It was sheer luck, and I'm so grateful that it just worked out that way. The universe was on my side that day.
Now, you mentioned that you were pretty young and you were looking for kids classes. How old were you when you first started jiu-jitsu?
So I was about 9 or 10 when I first started. So like back in like 2010, around that mark. I started really young, and I was that kid that was in the class where the coach was teaching the grappling stuff and all the positions, and I would be constantly asking him, okay, cool, this is fun. When are we going to punch something? Like, when are we going to start hitting pads? When are we going to do actual combat? And it took a while for the coach to be like, well, no, that's not what jiu-jitsu is. Jiu-jitsu is grappling. I'm like, yeah, cool. But when are we going to start punching stuff? It took me a while to like realize that it was its own form of martial arts and its own style of grappling and its own style of self-defense as well.
That's really cool. Now, did you ever branch into like MMA or any striking arts in addition to jiu-jitsu, or did you just stick purely with jiu-jitsu?
I did like a little bit of Muay Thai, a little bit of MMA, more so to actually help some of my teammates get ready for MMA fights. So just as a little bit of a dummy to throw a couple punches here and there and get used to getting hit. But it took a few like clean shots to the head to realize that I didn't enjoy getting hit in the head. And that kind of knocked the sense into me. And I'm like, maybe this MMA career isn't for me. Maybe one day I'll tick it off the bucket list. Like I always say, I get a lot of like relatives where they go, are you ever going to do a cage match? Are you ever going to do MMA? I'm like, I would like to tick it off the bucket list just to say that I did it, and just to say that, just to have perspective on how difficult it is and how different it is from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I mean, with someone with your ground skills, I mean, you'd be a problem for just about anybody. So that'd be a fun experience for sure. That'd be really
Hopefully.
cool.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
I just don't get too many shots on my way in. Hopefully, I don't get hit too much. Get in, get it to the ground, finish it, and then walk out of there with not much damage on me.
You're pretty quick. I think you'll be all right. You're pretty fast. Let me ask you this. So when you first started as a kid, what do you think kept you locked in with jiu-jitsu? Because there's a lot of kids and a lot of adults too that start jiu-jitsu, do it for a little bit, and then just kind of lose interest or decide it's not for them. What do you think it was about jiu-jitsu that really snagged you and kept you coming back?
There's a couple of things I think. Like I mentioned, the coach that I had was a guy by the name of David Christopher. And he was very, very good at keeping kids engaged and making the learning process really fun. He wasn't too bogged down on the details of it needs to be done this way. And like, it wasn't too, what would I say, like traditional in the sense of there wasn't much like an us professor kind of mentality. It was quite loose. It was quite creative. So he gave us space to figure it out ourselves. And that was what was like interesting for me, like finding the puzzle pieces and putting them together myself. That kept me really engaged. He was one for finding really creative games as well. So we would always play games at the end of class, and sometimes it would be relevant to the stuff that we were learning in class. Sometimes it was just a bit of fun, and we would play like we would call it like British Bulldog, where we're just flat out be tackling each other and slamming each other to the mat. It's a bit of just fun. But also like just competitiveness. I was the only girl in class when I first started. I wanted to just beat up all the boys. I wanted to bash them up. I wanted to like show that girls could do it and be dominant in that way. So I just kind of kept wanting to improve and wanting to get better until I was just the best in the class. No matter if it was a boy, a girl, whatever it was going to be, I just wanted to beat up everybody.
There's something you said there that I'd like to zoom in on a little bit. You mentioned the importance of keeping things fun. And I think that translates not just to kids, but also to adults as well. I think that in an activity like jiu-jitsu, where it is it's a very tough journey. It's a very humbling journey. Sometimes it can get to the point where you get burnt out. Like sometimes people just kind of feel they take it so seriously and they kind of lose the fun aspect and get so over-focused on just getting better and better and beating this guy and beating that guy. What are some things that you try to do to keep things light and fun so that you don't, as a very competitive person, how do you try to keep things fun?
I 100% agree. I think it's really important to have fun in your training. It's really important to have enjoyment in jiu-jitsu. There was a period of time where I really didn't enjoy jiu-jitsu, where I was really struggling because I was just doing it hard. I was just every session was really hard, and every session that I wasn't losing a singular exchange, or I was playing the A game all the time, so I didn't have space to be creative, or I was just running myself into the ground and not really progressing, but just doing things harder, and that just wasn't enjoyable for me. And then I stepped back and had a little bit of perspective on it of how creative I can be with my jiu-jitsu, and that brought back a lot of enjoyment. So just enjoying losing exchanges. Learning new skills comes with losing a lot of exchanges. Like skill development, it starts at the bottom and it works its way up, but it doesn't start good. It starts, you're trying to play a new particular guard and you're going to get smashed a little bit, and you just got to be okay with that, because that's skill progression. It doesn't start off being perfect. But when I refound that creativity and refound the love of learning new skills, that's when training became a whole lot more enjoyable for me. And that's when I found my love for jiu-jitsu again, and my love for competition and competing and getting out there and doing that kind of stuff. I didn't put too much pressure behind myself. Like, I was never forced to train. I was never forced to do jiu-jitsu. I was never forced to have a competitive career. I did it because I wanted to. And I think that it's really important to find why you enjoy it and not just do it because you feel like you have to.
Something else you mentioned that you were the only girl in your class. And that's something I always enjoy hearing this perspective, because when you look at women's jiu-jitsu, it's some of the sharpest technical jiu-jitsu, and there's a reason for it, in my opinion. I think that when you're kids, boys and girls are kind of the same physicality when they're kids. When they get older, the boys keep getting taller and bigger, the girls usually stay smaller. As a 55 kilogram practitioner, what strategies and positions seem to keep on working for you early on? Because obviously you kept training with lots of guys that were bigger than you. Were there any specific things you found working really well against larger training partners that kept your jiu-jitsu really sharp and dangerous?
As a smaller practitioner, it's really important to be technical. You can't rely on strength. You can't rely on size. You have to rely on technique, like understanding like leverage points, good framing, like technique, so you're not just trying to muscle people off of you all the time. Like distance management for me was the key thing, how to actually maintain the distance between myself and my partner and be really good at that. And that's, I think, where a lot of like my guard retention and my guard play came from, was that early stage. Okay, I don't like being underneath side control, so I'm going to do everything I can to prevent myself from being underneath side control. Like late stage defense is really important. Prevention, I think, is even more important than that. Don't end up in the shitty position so that you're not going to need to exert all this energy later on. So distance management, making sure frames are really strong, learning leverage points is what's super important for small people. And movement. Don't stand in front of a moving truck. If something's coming at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour, don't just stare at it. Move out of the pathway of it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. For smaller practitioners out there listening that feel like they just have a really tenuous grasp on the understanding of distance management, what pieces of advice can you give? Like for someone that's just really struggling with that distance management, what are some key things that have really worked for you to keep that area sharp?
I think for me, it's like you have 4 major assets on your body. You got 2 arms and you got 2 legs. Using all those assets, it's really important. Like not getting too tunnel vision on just framing with your upper body or just using your lower body, but having a little bit of a mix in both. And like I was mentioning before, not just squaring up with your partner all the time. If you're sitting in front of them, that's when they can put full force into you, and that's when it becomes that power to power battle of you're pushing, but they're driving into you, so something's going to fail at some point. Actually bringing yourself kind of off that center line and continuously cutting angles on your partner, like more than going into them, going around them is going to be a much more effective way to prevent them from putting their weight on you and using their strength directly at you. So using all your assets to take them off center line, cutting your angles around the outside, that's going to be the biggest key feature. And then the other thing I'd say is if you can't move them, move yourself. So if they're crushing down on you and you're pushing them away and that's not working, you always have the option of moving yourself backwards or moving yourself sideways. For me, the biggest thing that my coach would say, David Hart, who owns Dominance, he would always say shoulder walk, shoulder walk, shoulder walk, shoulder walk. He would, like, till he was blue in the face, he was telling me to just shoulder walk, move myself, move my body, walk on my shoulders and get away from it so that I can create space and get better angles. And it wasn't until I was like a brown belt that I actually had that light bulb moment of, oh shit, I can actually move right now, stop pushing and just move myself. And it's much easier that way.
Yeah, that was a huge concept for me as well, and it wasn't until way later on than much longer than it should have taken me to realize, like, okay, if a tree is falling on me, I'm not going to try to push the tree off of me. I'm going to try to shimmy my way out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it seems so obvious, but in jiu-jitsu, you feel like you can manipulate and move someone's body, and when it's not working, you're like, oh man, I'm doing something wrong. It's like, dude, just move yourself. Yeah, so that's very, very, very good advice you just gave.
It was one of those things where I'm like, oh, fuck, if only I just knew this, 4, 5, 6 years ago, I would have saved myself a lot of grief. But that's jiu-jitsu. That's, it's my job as a coach is to teach people as white belts something that I only found out as a black belt, to kind of fast track their learning experience. And that's, sometimes I just have those moments of, oh, fuck, if I knew that earlier, it'd just be so much easier. But, we live and learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great piece of advice. Something else I always really appreciate about watching you compete, Adele, is your mobility. You're a very hyper mobile person. You're not someone that sits still. You're always transitioning and looking for new angles. How do you develop that? Is that I'm sure a lot of people that are watching you compete are probably thinking like, man, how does she make that look so effortless? And how does she keep her mobility so frequent? Is that something that you naturally were able to do from the beginning, or did that take time?
I feel like it definitely developed over time. I have great mobility, terrible flexibility. So I can't touch my toes. If I stand up and flop myself straight, I can barely touch my toes. But I can almost 360 at the pinch point of my hip. I have weird mobility, and I think it's developed because I started jiu-jitsu quite young. I think my body is developed in a certain way that is very like jiu-jitsu orientated. So I played a lot of guard, specifically a lot of close guard. So my hips open up quite wide. Like I can sit in that butterfly stretch quite well. I think some of it's just because I started when I was young, but also nowadays I spend a decent amount of time on the mats trying to stretch, trying to do mobility stuff. I work with some of the guys at a place called Bulletproof. They have a mobile app, and that takes you through a lot of mobility exercises. And like I try and do that quite often, more so for like recovery purposes, to make sure that I'm doing as much in the opposite direction as I am in the direction that I am during jiu-jitsu. So if everything in jiu-jitsu is kind of inwards and tight and crunched in, I'm trying to like make sure that I'm opening my body out a little bit more, just to make sure I don't get super like jammed up and I don't get super stiff. And that definitely helps with my mobility as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great that you put extra time and effort into that. That's something everybody should be doing, because jiu-jitsu, like you described, it really does put us in this kind of curved, like hedgehog shaped kind of position, and most of the time, and it's not good for your back long term.
No. It makes us look hilarious when we're walking around all hunched over and like shoulders and elbows flaring out, and we're all kind of walking a bit funny.
Yeah, you can usually spot a jiu-jitsu guy from far. It's like, oh, he's got cauliflower and he walks bow-legged. Of course he does jiu-jitsu. Let me find out where that guy trains. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
What have been the most helpful things to open you up, to keep you from being so hunched over? Are there any particular stretches or drills or things that you do that have helped?
I do a lot of what would you call it, like a run and stretch, where you kind of like pinging forward on your hip and you have that kind of L shape through both your legs. I sit in that quite a lot. Just because I do a lot of guard, so my hip flexors do get quite tender and quite stiff. So things that stretch out my hips can be really useful. Things that stretch out my lower back, because I'm on my back quite a bit, and the lower part of my back is consistently engaged, so my lower hips are off the mat, so my legs can pummel well. It's really fatiguing on my lower back, so a lot of stretches through my lower back. Even just like putting a foam roller like at my lower back and letting my back naturally rest over that just to stretch it out is like super like relieving when I do it after training, and I sit there and I just relax into it. I feel like I can feel my vertebrae stretch back out into their natural position.
Yeah.
So that definitely resets me.
Do you feel that you've been able to gain some flexibility? I was actually surprised to hear that you don't feel you're very flexible. Have you been able to develop flexibility? Because I know people that are like real stiff who swear that by training and practicing, they've been able to get more flexible. And I know others that said that like, man, I've been doing it for a while and I don't feel like I'm getting more flexible. What's it been like for you?
I feel like I go through periods. Like I had this like something in my head during COVID where I'm like, I'm going to be able to do the splits one day. Like one day, if I just put enough time into sitting with my legs really wide in like different split positions, one day I'm going to be able to do the splits. No, I've never been able to do the splits, but it definitely did improve. It got better. And then I just kind of found something else that I got interested in and did less stretching in that way. And, you know, it's back to where it was. But I feel like if you do stay consistent with it, it does help. Flexibility is definitely important. I think mobility, jiu-jitsu wise, is more important, but I still think there's a lot of benefits of being flexible.
I think that, yeah, if you dedicate yourself to it long enough, things get better. I don't know if I'm like you. I don't know if I'll ever be able to do splits, but you know, we'll see. We'll see. I guess I'll keep.
It's a long road of just sitting there in front of the TV in weird positions and just trying to like pretend like it doesn't hurt, but it really hurts.
Yeah, right. It's just excruciating.
Yep.
Yeah. No, Adele, as you turned 18, I know you played soccer. You mentioned you played soccer pretty seriously before. At some point, you made the decision to go all in on jiu-jitsu. What do you think it was that sealed the deal for you to commit fully to pursuing a career in jiu-jitsu?
Well, what's really ironic about it is when I was playing soccer, I actually kept getting injured. So I know and then I decided that I'll do jiu-jitsu because less injury, obviously. My patellas don't run straight with my toes. My patellas run out a little bit sideways. So it means like when I'm sprinting off a standing start, it would pull through my knee and my hamstrings would constantly be getting pulled. And I've just been getting off the pitch really sore, and I'd always have like pulled hamstrings and things like that. And I was just getting sick of like getting injured and being sore in that way. But also jiu-jitsu is a single person sport, soccer is a team sport. And I did love being a part of a team. I really enjoyed that. But I also love a single person sport where I can take responsibility for the result of my matches. So I didn't need to rely on anybody else. I could just go in, do my work, like work as hard as I wanted to, and the results were my results. So they were a direct correlation of the effort that I put into, rather than in team sports. Sometimes like you're putting effort in, but the rest of your teammates may not be, and then the results are getting impacted by a differing workload.
Yeah, that's a very common theme that I've seen, and that's also what attracted me to martial arts too, and to jiu-jitsu, is that idea that it's all on me, and the glory if I win is mine, and but on the flip side, if I lose, it hurts even more because it's not spread out across a team of people. So
100%, yeah.
It is a really cool thing, and it's interesting because you have a team that's helping you develop, and you're helping each other get better, and you're going out to competitions wearing the same patch. But once you're out there, it's you and your performance. And for some 100%. People, that can be overwhelming. And for some people, it's exactly what you're looking for. So.
Yeah, I think single person sports is some of the hardest sports in the world. I do a lot of like comparison with tennis, because my partner, she did tennis quite seriously for a while. And I didn't really think much about tennis until she started explaining it to me. And it's much more complex than I thought. I thought, grab a tennis racket, smack balls back and forth, just hope that it lands in. Cool, if you win a point, you win a point. There's so much more strategy that goes behind it. It's crazy. We were watching like the Australian Open, and she's like, okay, on the second hit, he's going to hit it in this particular position, and then he's going to go cross court, and then he's going to rush to the net, and then he's going to come back. And everything she was saying was happening, and she could explain why it was happening. But single person sports are the hardest, because you are out there by yourself. You do take full responsibility for your results, for your training, all that kind of stuff. But it's also, sometimes it can be really lonely, because yes, you have a team to motivate you, but if you're not there, the class will still run. So you have to motivate yourself to go in. You have to motivate yourself for skill development. You have to motivate yourself to register for the competition. You have to motivate yourself to get up in the morning and do the actual competition itself. And that can be really hard, and that can take a lot of internal motivation. And it's a different ball game compared to team sports. I definitely think single person sports are some of the hardest in the world.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. One thing I imagine that makes things easier for you, you mentioned your partner, she's also a dedicated jiu-jitsu athlete. So I imagine that's a beneficial thing to have someone who's on the same path as you. For a lot of people, that's not the case. How's that been as far as helping you stay motivated and stay focused?
She's more obsessed than I am. So she didn't train originally. I introduced her to jiu-jitsu, and she hated it at the start. She couldn't stand the close contact and the sweatiness and all that. She hated it. She couldn't stand it. And then slowly I kind of coached her in, and I'm like, oh, you don't need to train, but come in and just say hello to everybody. Like, you watch a class, that kind of thing. And then she would roll with me, and then she would roll with me and one other person, and then she would roll with me and two other people, and then progressively would just kind of grow the circle of people that she felt comfortable training with. And then eventually she could just do a class and roll with everybody. But it was a very, very slow burn to get her in. And then she understood the intricacies of it and that it was a little bit more complex than, hey, just try and choke this person. There was a lot more detail that went into it, a lot more technique. And she's a type A person. She's a problem solver. She loves puzzles. She's too smart for her own good. She's valedictorian of her university, just graduated. She's a dentist.
Wow.
So she likes solving problems. She likes how intellectual jiu-jitsu can be, and now she knows more statistics on jiu-jitsu than I do. She does more tape study than I do.
That's incredible. We were talking earlier about strategy, and I think that's brilliant what you just said. As a combat athlete, if you can get close to like a doctor or a dentist or a chiropractor, that's a good play. It's just like it's good strategy there in selecting who you're gonna be with, because
100%.
That'll come in.
She'll message me midway through the day and be like, "This is a really good strategy for this match, and at this minute mark, you should watch, what she does here." And she unpacks things and is so good at analyzing what's going on and understanding what's going on that now she's like such a crucial part of the whole puzzle that is like me going out there and competing. It's so many elements that come into play, and she's such a crucial part of that.
That's really awesome. Now, with being a type A personality, I imagine you obviously you're probably one yourself. How has that been? Because I know a lot of jiu-jitsu couples that are both very competitive people. Has that led to any funny stories or anything?
We used to be really, really competitive with each other. We like one of the first dates we had, we were like playing around with tennis balls and we were throwing tennis balls, and it was like, I think I can throw a tennis ball further than you can. And she's like, no, I think I can. And then it just ended up, we were going back and forth on it, and then she would throw it and I would throw it, and I'm like, oh, mine went further, and she's like, no, it didn't, and we'd start arguing about it. And then pretty quickly we realized, okay, we're not allowed to be competitive with each other anymore. We're not allowed to do anything where we're versing each other. Every time we have to be on the same team. So if we're playing mini golf, we don't check down how many hits we're not keeping score of that. If we're playing video games, we change the settings so we're always on the same. If we're playing Mario Kart, we're playing Mario Kart on the same team. So if red team's winning, then red team's winning. It's not red versus blue. It's like we're both trying to beat the computer. So, jiu-jitsu, like, I'm sure there are so many people that could resonate with it. It is so hard rolling with your partner sometimes, especially when there's a bit of a skill gap, because I've been training for a significantly longer amount of time than she has. And it's definitely caused a little bit of tension. It's caused, arguments of either I'm rolling too hard and she doesn't like that I'm rolling too hard, or I'm rolling too gently and rolling too soft that now she's like, well, you're not even trying, so why are we doing this? It's such a balance. It's
like what do you want from me?
I can't win. Honestly, I can't win. Or like even the dynamic of she'll do something, I'll give her advice, she'll completely ignore it. Somebody will give the exact same advice, almost in the exact same terminology, and she'll be like, oh my God, that's a fantastic idea. I should definitely do that. I'm like, I don't even know why I try now. But we're still navigating it. We're much better than we used to be, that's for sure.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I imagine, again, when you have someone that you're with that's on the same journey as you, that's got to make things much easier. Because I think for most people, like the amount of dedication and time and commitment that it takes to reach the levels in jiu-jitsu that you've reached, if you don't have a partner or even just friends and family that understand that, it can be very isolating. It can be very difficult. So that's 100%. Cool that you've got that. Yeah, it's cool that you've got that locked down.
I'm very, very lucky to be surrounded by the people that I am and have so many supportive people like across how long my journey has been. I've always had a lot of supportive people around me, and I'm very, very lucky for that. That's for sure.
That's incredible. Now, at what point in your career do you think that you really found your competitive stride, and what do you credit that to?
I think it's actually gone through some peaks and troughs. So when I was a blue belt, super competitive, like aggressively competitive, wanted to compete in everything, wanted to win everything, wanted to do flashy moves, flying arm bars were kind of my thing as I was a blue belt. And then purple belt, same kind of thing. Like I had that, that aggression in competition. I had that drive. I had that excitement to get out there. And then actually through my brown belt is when things kind of started to get a little bit funny, where I didn't know whether I wanted to pursue it. I didn't know, there was no guarantee in that side of things. Obviously COVID was happening a little bit later on in that, but even before COVID, I was competing as a brown belt and just not enjoying it and not knowing why I was doing it and not really finding much purpose in it. So I lost a little bit of that drive. I lost a little bit of that like competitive nature and that aggression. And then COVID happened. I had almost a year off of competition just because Australia was really locked down. So state to state, we couldn't travel between states. We couldn't leave our houses. We weren't allowed to train. So things really like grind to a halt. And then on the outwards, like after COVID, where things were just starting to open up and we were just starting to train again, that was when that creativity came back. And, you know, we were training for enjoyment rather than training necessarily for a purpose or a competition, and we could play a little bit more. And then ADCC trials started coming around in 2022. I think the trials may have been in 2021. I can't remember, to be honest. And that was one of the things that popped up, and that was, okay, here's the goal. Okay, let's start working to the goal in a little bit of a different way. And that training camp was quite fun, very hard, very difficult, but very enjoyable through the skill development process, through the conditioning process, through the rolling process. And then by the time I got to the side of the mats to actually do the trials in Sydney, I was probably the most excited I've ever been to compete. I was happy, I was healthy, I was just raring to get out there, and had one of the best competitive runs that I've ever had. And then just try to continue that kind of mentality through the rest of my competitions that year and now onwards. So I just try and compete happy. I try and train happy, make sure my training camps are in an environment that keeps me happy. And then most importantly, when I'm on the side of the mat, kind of have that moment of, you know, gratification for where I am and what I'm doing, and the fact that I get to travel around the world with people I love, doing what I love.
Now, obviously, we've seen the result of that passion and that drive with your recent performance at ADCC. I'm curious to ask you, fellow Aussie Craig Jones is throwing out millions of dollars now, and they're talking about having a women's division on the next one. Do you think we're going to see you out there going for the $1 million?
Oh, look, $1 million is $1 million, and it's not a million AUD, it's $1 million USD. So that's on my end of things. The conversion is fantastic for us. Look, $1 million is $1 million. I'd be silly not to say yes to it. I did definitely watch the CJI, and they put on a show and had really good viewership. And I think it things like that grow the sport. Like, yes, I did ADCC and have so much respect for ADCC and what it's built and what it will continue to build. But I also appreciate what Craig was doing and the show that he was putting on and the audience that he had there. Like, that was a very, very impressive thing, a very, very risky thing that he did, but I have a lot of props for him. He definitely has balls, that's for sure.
What are your thoughts on the ring, competing in a bowl-shaped mat like that? Do you think that would be something?
I think it's sick. I
loved it. Yeah.
I think it's really creative because it takes away a lot of the problems that we have with some of the other rule sets, which is, well, if you just keep backing up and you just keep getting reset, you know, it's really hard to fight somebody that's running. Or, you know, when the referee resets, everybody's taught, take advantage of that. When the referee resets, you see if you can slip an elbow in, or see if you can like pressure him down a little bit more, or it takes away from that. The referee has no involvement in it. It's like the referee's there for safety, but other than that, there's no involvement. But I also do like the 3 5-minute rounds and the 5 5-minute rounds in the final. I think that's a cool, it's a cool way to incentivize just going for it, going for the kill, but also like winning all exchanges because you don't have anything to lose. You end up in a shitty position. Okay, reset, start again, start from standing and go from there. That's what we do in our fundamental classes. We do 5-minute rounds. So 3 5-minute rounds, it seems like a good time and a good like rule set to incentivize just scraps and scrambles.
Yeah. That's what I loved about it as well. I think one of the most frustrating things about watching really any jiu-jitsu event is when there's great action happening, but because of the scrambles and because of the intensity, you fall off, you get off the mats and you get reset. So that really does kind of take away from that, like you said. And I also loved the structure of the rounds too. So yeah, it'd be super cool to see you get out there. I mean, obviously, anytime we can see you get out there and do your thing, it's a good day. So.
Well, $1 million hopefully coming back to Australia.
Exactly. Adele, I'll tell you what, we've reached a point of the show. This is where I always play a game with my guest. This is the game's called The Pummel. It's basically a series of random questions. Some of these are about jiu-jitsu. Some of them have nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. But
Yep,
if you're
I'm
down to
all
play the
for it.
pummel, all right, let's do it. Cool.
I'm all for it. Let's go.
Now, Adele, this is an interesting question for you because you come from a country that has probably the most dangerous animals that exist anywhere in the world.
See, that's what people say, but I've been to Florida. And Florida's pretty damn scary.
Yeah. Florida's got...
like, yeah, Australia is terrifying. There's crocodiles in Florida. Like, there's signs about crocodiles fucking everywhere.
Yeah, there's also the people. Yeah, the classic Florida man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the largest animal you think you could beat in hand-to-hand combat?
Oh, I don't know. I'm pretty ballsy. Like, I back myself on majority of exchanges. I would say biggest animal. I could definitely take a kangaroo. They're terrifying, but I think I could do it.
Yeah.
I reckon like a lion would have it up on me. I wouldn't be engaging in that battle. Anything bigger than like, you know, a medium-sized dog, and I think it'd have it up on me, unfortunately.
I think that would be true for most people, though. I think a lot of people underestimate what animals can actually do. I was watching there's a video I saw on YouTube not long ago where a beaver killed a guy. He bit him in the leg and it got his femoral artery and the guy bled to death. Jesus. So I'm thinking like, yeah, I had it in my head. Okay, I could probably beat like a German Shepherd, you know. But then I'm like, but a beaver killed a dude. Like he bit him in the right spot. Dude, if a beaver did that, a German Shepherd could for sure do that.
Dude, so I'm pretty sure that there was something that was going around about like either pugs or like French bulldogs, like killed and ate their owner.
Oh my god!
Like I'm like, if they can do that kind of damage, I'm like, dogs are brutal, man.
Oh, they gang up on you. Yeah, they gang up on you. But kangaroos a ballsy. That's definitely a bold statement. Now, I've seen people fight kangaroos or at least fight them off. In fact, there's a video where I think a kangaroo was like strangling a guy's dog and he punched it in the face. And I mean, that thing ate the punch like he was just literally like Terminator, like nothing. He just sort of stared at him. So what's the strategy for fighting a kangaroo then?
Because dude, those things are so strong. They're quite big and quite strong, and you know, they actually have like really sharp claws and they'll rock back on their tail and they'll kick with their legs as well. So they're ferocious things. I don't know. It'd be like cut angles, get around to its back and hopefully like lock up a rear naked choke and just like squeeze it until we can get it. But
I was going to say taking the back seems like a good call probably.
100%. A little arm drag there, slip my way to the back so I'm not anywhere near its hands or anywhere near its feet, and then try and finish it with a good little rear naked choke from back control.
Solid strategy. I like it. If you found a genie lamp and the standard genie rules apply, so no killing people and no wishing for more wishes, what 3 wishes would you make?
Oh, dang, that's hard. Infinite money sounds pretty good. Being able to just like look after all my family just for eternity would be amazing. The idea of like never getting full would be pretty cool. Like just being able to eat and eat and eat and not put on weight and just be able to like enjoy food would be pretty mad. Probably like something like a superpower, like either being able to fly would be pretty cool.
Those are excellent wishes.
I spend so much time on planes, and just the idea of like being able to cruise through the clouds at like, you know, crazy speeds and be able to get from one place to the next without needing to sit in the seat for hours, that would be pretty cool.
Those are good wishes. I like those. I like the reasoning behind them too, for sure. Those are really good. Have you ever had a supernatural experience? Have you ever seen like a ghost or an alien or a UFO or anything like that?
See, like I pride myself on the fact that I don't believe in that stuff. But having said that, if I'm down a corridor and I'm switching off the light and I need to like get into a room, I'm still running. Like I'm switching that light off and I'm sprinting because if something's behind me, I don't want it getting me. And I'm closing doors, and like if I hear a noise, I'm hiding under the sheets. Like even though I to my core don't believe in ghosts, I'm still like deathly afraid if there's like any kind of noise in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, you just described that perfect thing where like you turn off the lights and you're walking to the bedroom and you're telling yourself like, yeah, whatever, I'm fine. But there's that creeping thing on the back of your neck where you're just like, man, is there, and you don't want to look because it's like, man, now I'm like freaking myself out. You just walk calmly and then you shut the door behind you quickly. Yeah. You know? Yeah, I think we all.
I do listen to like podcasts about like either true crime or like supernatural stuff. Like I do listen to some podcasts about it, and there's always that like thing in the back of my head that's like, maybe like it could be real, like it could be a thing. But I'm like, I try and reason myself. I'm like, nah, there has to be a reasonable explanation behind all these things. But my partner, she deep dives into all conspiracy theories. Like she's fully into all the conspiracy theories, and we have like very heated discussions about, you know, how the pyramids were made and all that kind of stuff.
I think what kills the supernatural stuff is that there's so many eyewitnesses that just don't seem credible. You know what I mean? Like there's always the guy that saw Bigfoot, and he also happened to also see a UFO on a different trip. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, there's so many of those guys, but then every now and then you see a person that seems like, you know, I don't think that person's lying. I don't think they're trying to get attention. That person seems sincere. Yeah. But it's all it's all the crazy people around it that just make it ruin it, you know?
It's the type of people. It's unfortunately the type of people that get obsessed with that kind of stuff just make it seem a whole lot less credible. But who knows? Maybe they're onto something and we're just like up in the clouds and pretending like, you know, Bigfoot doesn't exist when really he's just chilling out and doing his own thing.
Could be.
Who knows?
Do you have any tattoos?
I do. I have one on my rib. And it's a continuous line of 2 roses. So it's like drawn in one continuous line. And me and my mum have the same tattoo. She has it on the top of her shoulder blade, and I got it when I was 18.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. Was that your first tattoo?
It was my first tattoo. Right now it's my only tattoo, but I made some bets with some friends about winning ADCC. And part of that was, okay, if I win ADCC, we're going to actually get a Charizard tattoo, like the Pokemon.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So now I have to get a Charizard tattoo somewhere on my body. I kind of made the bet, and I was hopeful that I would win, obviously. Like, I wanted to win, but I was also like, you know, this will be funny. Let's just make a bet for a tattoo. And now we all have to get a tattoo, and we have a tattoo artist that's drawing up us a design now, and next time I'm in Perth, we're all going to get it done.
Nice. You owe the homies a Charizard. I like that. That's really good.
It's the correct choice of Pokemon. Let's be real. It's the correct choice.
Defend your position. Go. I want to hear. Why is Charizard the best?
Like, you know, if you're picking between, Squirtle and Bulbasaur, like they're the original ones. They're the, like, you know, when you have a kid and you like line up they have to pick, and they have to pick from day one, and they have to like hang with that decision. Like Charizard's the coolest. Like Charmander is the cutest, but also he's the coolest, and he evolves into the most powerful Pokemon. And also, you know, the actual Charizard, what would you call it, trading card, worth millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, that alone there's value behind it.
Yeah, that's a very good defense. I agree with you completely. For sure. My son will be right on board with you. He loves Charizard. That's his favorite too.
It's the way to go.
What do you think is the worst job you've ever had in your life?
Worst job I haven't had. I'm a jiu-jitsu bum, man. I haven't had many jobs.
Okay.
I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a really long time. Like,
good for you. That's awesome.
The worst job I can imagine doing.
Yeah.
Any desk job, to be honest. Any desk job where I'm sitting there punching numbers in a computer just does not seem like how I want to spend my time. If I wanted to be, you know, miserable, then I'd be miserable and rich, and I'd be working a desk job. But I want to enjoy life and have fun, and that's what jiu-jitsu does for me. But, you know, my brother, my mum, my dad, they all work corporate jobs, and they all actually really enjoy it. So just each to their own on that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a personality thing. I did desk jobs, I did construction jobs, I did security jobs. Of all the desk one was the hardest for me. I'm very ADD. I like to talk. So it's like, I'm a chit chatter, and I like to hang out and chat and shoot the shit with people while we're getting things done. So I found construction and warehouses were kind of what was better for me. So yeah, I totally relate with that. It's hard to sit still. Yeah,
I agree. I did a little bit of construction and really, really enjoyed it. I actually really liked hands-on stuff like that. I really like building things and, getting creative in that way, but also just using tools and using my hands. And construction was really cool. I think if I were doing jiu-jitsu, you know, I could also be doing something in construction. There was a period of time where I wanted to pick up a trade, like carpentry. But, you know, jiu-jitsu took off for me, so I decided to stick with that. But jiu-jitsu didn't take off. I'd probably be doing something like carpentry.
That's cool. I like that. What do you think is a secret talent that you have that people might not know about?
Oh, I don't know. I could play Fortnite pretty alright. Like, I could play video games pretty alright, and I do enjoy Fortnite. Like, and there'll be so many people that listen to that being like, oh, that's for kids. That's it. Yeah, but I'll beat up a bunch of 12-year-olds on Fortnite. Like, I got no shame in that. Absolutely not. For sure. We got elite remotes with like buttons on the back of them as well. Like we're decked out here. We're ready to go. Just staying up to all hours of the night.
Breaking children's hearts across the world.
Oh,
when
100%.
she's not conquering ADCC, she's beating up your kids online.
Oh, 100%. And I'm smack talking them too. I don't even care. Some of the audacity on these 12-year-olds, I'm all for smack talking them.
What's been your most satisfying victory on Fortnite?
Every time there's like a new map and a new like update, it's like the first win you get on that new update. Because like everything's changing, everybody's still trying to figure it out, and when you get a win on that new update, that's glorious. That's a different kind of feeling.
That's for sure. Yeah, I can see that, because people don't have everything like mapped out and planned out in their head of where they're going to go and what areas they're going to use. And yeah, that's cool.
A good building battle as well for like the final kill, where everybody's like speed building and trying to edit things and all that kind of stuff. And when it gets really chaotic and winning those battles, that's really satisfying too.
Yeah. For sure. Sure. What do you think is the worst injury you've had in jiu-jitsu?
Worst injury. I've been like, touch wood, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't had anything too crazy. When I was a bit younger, I cracked a rib just from somebody spear tackling me. It was one of those things where like I just wasn't paying attention for a second, and their shoulder just ran into my rib and popped it and cracked it. Besides that, like I live in blissful ignorance. So if something hurts, I'm going to wait it out a little bit and just hope that it feels better. Like I'm too sketched out about getting like MRIs on my knees or MRIs on anywhere else in my body, because if it still works, I don't want to know what's wrong with it. Blissful ignorance is what I go by. I think something that took me out for a little bit was I had like major lower back problems for a while, and that was like really, really difficult. I was waking up in the morning, really struggling to get out of bed. But a lot of rehab, a lot of strengthening and specific kind of mobility stuff made a massive difference for that.
Excellent. Well, yeah, I'm glad that's helped for sure.
Yeah.
So those can be long nagging things. So if you're finding relief, that's good for sure. What do you think is your favorite bad food to eat?
If it's savory, probably like dirty burgers and chips. Like I really like Americans do burgers really well. They do like really dirty, greasy, disgusting burgers with all the sauce, and you need like gloves while you're eating it, and you need a shower after you've done eating it, like that kind of stuff. But like for sweets, I'm a sweet fiend as well. So like chocolate lava cakes and things like that. Oh my God, they're one of my favorite things in the world. When you cut into it and the chocolate's just oozing out, and you got like vanilla ice cream next to it.
Mixes in with the ice cream. Oh yeah. Makes that little soupy thing where the chocolate mixes with the melted ice cream. That's
I knew you'd get it. I knew you'd understand how good it is. It's just like you can taste it right now.
You can totally. What's your most hated food? What's something you cannot eat no matter what?
I eat most foods. Peanut butter I don't like. Okay. And that surprises a lot of people, because peanut butter is such a widely loved thing, and my mum is obsessed with peanut butter. But I've tried it. And I keep trying it, but I'm just not a peanut butter person. I don't like eating it. I'm just not for it. That and like severely spicy foods. Like my spice tolerance is just horrifically bad. It used to be better when I was younger, but now it's terrible. It's like we'll put one chili in there and I'm running for water and, complaining and having a bit of a sulk.
What do you think was the scariest moment of your life?
Like actually scary?
Mm-hmm. Like near-death experiences or anything like that?
I don't think I've had any near-death experiences. I don't know. I do a lot of dumb shit, but I don't think I've ever been like that close. It's probably when like people around me have like other health scares or things like that. Like when I was around 17, my brother just had these like random spurts where he would just start fainting. We didn't know what was going on, and that was actually pretty terrifying. And that was probably one of the scariest things that's happened to me, where it went from everything being okay to all of a sudden we didn't know what was going on, and we didn't know if he was okay, and we had to take him to the hospital and get all these checks, and doctors weren't giving us any answers. And he turned out to be totally fine. Like they could not explain it, but it just never happened again. But there was that moment of like, holy shit, like my life could change like forever, and it could be as a result of nothing, and it could just come out of nowhere. And that definitely like gave me a massive scare, and gave me a little bit of perspective of like, fuck, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's next. So you just kind of got to keep trucking forward and do what you can with your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a great lesson you took for sure. And I'm really happy your brother's okay too.
Yeah. He's all good.
That's definitely scary.
He's loving life. He's living in London at the moment, and traveling around Europe and having the best time ever.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great to hear. What do you think is who's your favorite grappler of all time?
Recently I've been asked this question a few times, and it's so hard to pick because there are so many people that have that I admire for so many different reasons. And I'm also in a very privileged situation where these people that I've admired for so long, I also get to like see and train with and, interact with. But, I have a lot of like admiration for some of the local guys. I've like been able to train with people like Lockie and Liv, who have obviously broken onto the mainstream and done incredible things at these major events. But also like Andre Guerrero, who has the longest resume you could possibly imagine of just accolade after accolade after accolade. But also he's just such a nice guy and very happy with what he does and runs an amazing space with amazing culture. I obviously love watching people like Mikey Musumeci. I love watching people like Rafa Mendes. The list is just endless. But I think there's so many to take from so many different grapplers over the years.
Yeah, it's definitely a hard question to narrow one for a lot of people because there's so many influences that are out there. So
yeah,
you definitely named some of my favorites though, for sure. What do you think is your biggest phobia?
Heights is definitely a hard one for me.
Heights, yeah.
Like the idea of bungee jumping, I could not think of anything worse. I'd probably go skydiving, but I don't think I'll ever go bungee jumping. That just there's no part of my brain that's like, this is an enjoyable thing, or this is going to be like something that we look back on and we're like, yeah, this was great. I'm just like, I have no interest in bungee jumping. I'm definitely not a fan of spiders. I'd get my dad to be killing spiders in the house. I don't want to be touching them. I actually got bitten by a whitetail in the lead up for ADCC. And I got God. You have those experiences where you have a little bit of like something itchy on your arm and you're like, oh, it's nothing. And then it started blowing up. I'm like, oh, fuck, I must have a staph infection. Like, this is annoying. Had to go to hospital, had to get it drained, had to go on an IV antibiotics. And they ended up taking like a swab of it and they cultured the swab. And no bacteria came up, and they're like, oh, it could be a whitetail. And then a few weeks down the road, we find a massive whitetail that was like around the vicinity of our bedroom.
Oh my God.
So sometimes you have those excuses of, oh no, it's okay, it's just a spider bite. I had the opposite. I was like, it's a staph infection, and it turned out to be a spider bite.
Oh my God! Wow.
I'm not a spider person.
For people not familiar with whitetails, like where do they fall in the range of like dangerous, like how dangerous is that bite compared to like a black widow or something else?
They're not as dangerous as a black widow. Like a black widow, you go in a hospital and like for us, we get redbacks. Redbacks are like real high on the spectrum. If you get bitten by a redback, that's life threatening. Like you go to the hospital and you make sure that you get the right treatment straight away. Whitetails, it can range. It just depends on. I think it depends on how much you get bitten and where you get bitten and things like that. But for me, it wasn't too bad. It just, my forearm swelled up decently. Like the actual part where it bit me swelled up pretty hard, and then that filled up with a little bit of fluid, so we had to get that drained. It's enough that you need to go to the doctors and check it out and make sure that the swelling goes down. For me, not enough that it was life-threatening, but it also was on an extremity, so it wasn't anywhere near my actual body, so my body could process it pretty easily.
Oh, that's lucky for that. Yeah, I could see where, depending where you get bit, like if it's in closer proximity to like your heart or your lungs or something, I could see that being more risky. Yeah. What do you think is, what is your prized possession? What's something material that you own that means a lot to you?
My black belt. That's something that I'm like pretty precious about. Just because it does mean a lot to me. represents a really long journey for me. And like I'm traditional in that way, where like I have one black belt, and that's the black belt that I wear, and that's the like I don't have a collection of black belts. I just have my black belt, my one black belt. And even if I'm doing no-gi competitions, I'll still travel with my black belt, and it'll still be with me. And I'll still bring it to every competition, gi or no gi, it doesn't matter. That's something that I would never want to lose. And like I don't put it in my check-in luggage. I'll put it in my carry-on. So if my check-in luggage gets lost, I still have my black belt.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Final question for the pummel game. If a zombie apocalypse breaks out right now in Australia, what's the first thing you do?
Oh, grab my family, go to the country as far out as I can, and try and build a little hut and try and survive away from absolutely everything. I think like Australia's pretty okay because we're an island. If a zombie apocalypse is breaking out, like we're pretty isolated, which is cool. But getting out of any kind of major city, like just getting away from everybody.
Yeah, if you have the survival skills to be out in the wilderness, if you've got the outback of Australia, that's a pretty solid plan. It's a pretty solid place to be.
I've watched enough episodes of Bear Grylls to hopefully get me by.
That's awesome. And Adele, that was the final question for the pummel game. Congratulations, you win. You got your double underhooks.
Oh, beautiful. Love it.
So Adele, you had obviously a legendary run in your ADCC performance recently, capturing weight and absolute titles. I'd love to talk to you about preparing for competitions for people out there who want to compete at their very best. How do you generally structure your camps before a big event like ADCC? Are you someone that follows a pretty strict regimen leading up to tournaments?
Yes. Like I work best on schedule. I work best on routine. And sticking to a routine. That's how I kind of optimize my own training. But I also select a team around me that, have their roles within that team. So, you mentioned him earlier, but Jake O'Driscoll was a really big part of this training camp, and he was in charge of, deciding what we were, like what the goals of each training session were, what the themes of the week were, what the output was looking like through each session, how many times I was lifting, things like that. We were quite specific with it. We were quite dialed in. We didn't want to be in situations where it was get on the mat and hope that it's a productive session. It was very much like, make sure the right people are on the mat. Make sure we're doing these specific drills. Make sure we're doing, like, having this particular goal in these rounds. So everything was very planned out, and planned out quite far in advance. So we had a big period of time that was like skill development, and then it was honing those skills, and then it was making sure that we put them in like a cohesive structure, so all of the different skills could be used within one round. And then it was, okay, build confidence on these skills. So we planned quite far out in advance. Everything was very specific. Everything was really planned out, and the schedule was pretty consistent as well. So week to week, it was pretty similar. Same sessions, same, like I'll wake up at the same time, I'll go to the gym for the same amount of time, I'll lift on the same days, so things like that. Stayed very consistent. I would try and avoid any external things impacting those training sessions.
That's great. Yeah, that's really awesome that you do it that way. Generally speaking, do the rules of an upcoming event typically dictate the types of drills and training that you do, or do most of your camps look pretty similar?
They look fairly similar, especially because my style is very like submission orientated. There definitely are like ADCC, for instance, wrestling was a really important thing, whereas wrestling's a less important thing for something like a submission only rule set. So there were some differences in that aspect. There were some skill development things that we needed to put extra effort into. So that there's that. There's obviously doing research on how to best game the system. Every rule set has something that you can take advantage of. So being aware of what you could take advantage of for the different rule sets, like the ADCC rule set, like a submission only rule set, like we definitely had discussions about that. But it didn't change, like the output still stayed the same. The scheduling still stayed the same. It was just a matter of like, we put a little bit more time and energy into wrestling.
That's excellent. Now, besides the wrestling, was there anything else ADCC specific that you guys were focusing on? You mentioned that there's some certain things that could be taken advantage of depending on the event. Besides the wrestling, was there anything else with ADCC that you guys were making sure to focus on?
We definitely did a lot of like turtle exchanges, because turtle is a big position in ADCC. It negates all points. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, if we are in either top or bottom of any total exchanges, that we were quite sharp on that. You know, working on OT, how to either prevent somebody from pulling guard on me or pulling guard on somebody else within that rule set, within the OT rule set of not getting a negative. That was really important as well. Yeah, they were the major things for ADCC, like the turtle exchanges and the wrestling exchanges. They were probably the biggest difference between that and something like that submission only or IBJJF.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What do you think is something you do off the mats that you include in your daily life that's been really valuable to help you prepare for competition?
I do make sure that I do like recovery things. Like the output on my body is just, especially in a training camp, is quite significant. So doing things like ice baths, saunas, active recovery, things like that, I think is really important. I think one of the biggest differences I made through this camp as well was lifting consistently. I in the past kind of would be comfortable sacrificing strength and conditioning sessions if I were tired or sore or anything like that. But I tried to go down the route this time of, like, even if I was tired or sore, I would still lift, maybe decrease the weight so that I wasn't maxing out as much, but still like consistently lifting 3 days a week. And that made a massive difference by the end of the training camp. Yeah, it was hard in the training camp, and there were some days that I just did not want to go to the gym. I did not want to spend hours lifting. But it paid off in the end. I felt very strong. My body held up quite well. Like structurally, I felt quite strong. So when I was at the training sessions, I was, you know, decreasing my risk of injury, things like that. I felt like more solid, if that makes sense. So that I could have the high output and the high impact rate on the mats. It just kept me safer.
That's excellent. Now, Adele, I know that you pride yourself on being an all-natural athlete. What are some things that you have to really make sure that you're including in your strength and conditioning and in your recovery so that you're not breaking down as much since you are all natural?
I think it's just having like a good lifting program. I think it's like, don't overcomplicate your lifting program. Like, we don't need to be doing all these hyper specific exercises. I think it's like sometimes basic is better. I find I have the best gains when, you know, I'm doing basic squats or bench presses, or like nothing too complicated, nothing that's going to mean that I'm spending 3 hours at a gym doing a million different exercises, because I need to do one exercise that works the front of my bicep, and then another exercise that works the back of my bicep, and then another exercise that works on my delt, when, you know, we have exercises that can max out the gains that we're getting. That was something that was really useful, like just not overcomplicating things. I think made it really simple for me. But recovery wise, like mobility stuff was really useful. Saunas, ice baths, like how actually effective saunas and ice baths were, I don't know. It's one of those things where there's really limited research behind it, and I am quite like a research based person. Like, I do like to know what the scientific studies are actually saying behind some of these things. There's really limited research on what they're saying about ice baths or saunas, but even if it's just the mental game of things, if you know, I have a hard training session and I can sit in a sauna and, you know, decompress for a minute, or if I get in an ice bath, and I cannot stand ice baths. I think they're like sent from hell. I think they're the worst thing in the world. But if I can sit in an ice bath for 3 minutes and be freezing cold, then I can conquer the world. Then I can do anything if I can sit in an ice bath for 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think for sure it's got to help with mental toughness. I would also imagine inflammation. I mean, for sure that's got to help with inflammation as well.
It makes sense. It makes sense that it helps with inflammation. There's some things about saying that it decreases like brown fat, whatever that is. Yeah, there is some research behind it. It's just limited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do them once in a while, and I feel better. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel better after I do an ice bath. When I'm doing it like you, I'm just like, dude, what the hell am I doing? Why am I in this tub of ice right now?
It's so brutal.
Yeah.
it brings the strongest, fittest people to their knees.
Yeah. Yeah. But afterwards, I usually do feel pretty good. I feel a little energized, or at least, you know, not so sore. So there's that. But that's cool. Yeah. It's cool that you really do, focus on things extracurricularly outside of the jiu-jitsu mats to help you get better. Let me ask you this. So we talked earlier that you're a natural athlete. We hear a lot of athletes on the male side complaining and expressing frustrations that they feel like if they are all natural, that they're not one of the many. You know, and then they feel like a lot of people are using enhancements and things like that. Is that the same thing? Do you get that same sense in the women's division as well? Or do you feel like there's more natural athletes in the women's division compared to the men's?
I would like to think that there's more natural athletes in the women's division than the men's division. It's so hard to tell with the females, to be honest, because the females are not going to be abusing things like TRT or, you know, growth hormones, because it's going to be really obvious if, you know, they're starting to lose their hair and they're walking out, you know, with traps for days and things like it's going to be really clear. Yeah. I think for the females, the bigger thing is like using things that aid in recovery, and then they go unnoticed. And I think it's so hard to tell with the females. I truly hope that it's not as big of a problem in the female division. It's just so hard to know. It's really, and the problem with things like IBJJF drug testing is it does not take a rocket scientist to game it. It's not an accurate way to actually test these athletes. I think we need to start testing them out of season. I think we need to start testing them more like randomly. I think that's the only way to actually have a realistic indication who's doping and who's not.
Well, I think it's also tremendous when we see people like yourself who are all natural winning championships the way that you do, to show that, hey, you don't have to. I mean, you really don't. You can do this and you can be great without using enhancements. And
for me, it's not worth sacrificing. Like, for one, it's not worth sacrificing the impacts on my body. Like, yes, jiu-jitsu is really important to me. Winning titles is really important to me. But, you know, down the line, having kids is really important to me. Having like full function of my body is really important to me. Like there are athletes out there where we can see the results of steroid abuse, and you just have to sit back and be like, is it worth it? Like, is it worth putting that much like strain and pressure on your body for such a short-term gain? And I just don't, the maths doesn't add up for me. It just really doesn't. And I also have people around me that set a really good example. Liv and Lockie advocate for clean sports, and they always have, and I've seen what they can do as well, and you know, if they can do it, then it sets a really good example. Levi Jones, for instance, who's a clean athlete as well, sets an amazing example for the rest of the athletes here. He is one of the best in the world at a really competitive weight division, and he's clean. Like, the proof's in the pudding.
Absolutely. And I love that you pointed out the long-term health risks, because I think that at the end of the day, that's something that young people really have to understand. It's like, man, if you decide to go that route, for guys that grew up watching professional wrestling, for example, just look back and watch look at the list of all the superstars that you watched as a kid who are dead now.
Yeah.
Not many of them live past 50 years old. And so that's, you know, it's something to really be aware of. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason why they ban substances. Like, there's a reason why we don't use them, and why they're not freely accessible, and why they are behind this. Either they're just flat out illegal, or they need to be prescribed by a doctor, somebody who, you know, has the knowledge to actually be able to prescribe it to people. It's because it's dangerous. It's just flat out dangerous, especially when people are just stacking random things because, you know, the person next door said that this is going to make them better and stronger and fitter and faster. And they don't know the repercussions because they're just not aware of it, or they haven't been educated in that way. It's scary and it's dangerous. And I really hope that something comes in to moderate it, like to monitor it a whole lot better. But I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate you sharing your perspective, because we haven't heard, I don't feel like we've heard a lot of female athletes talk about that. We've heard it more from the male side of things. So I really do appreciate you sharing your insights on that. I hope you're right. I hope you're right that most are not, you know, because you don't want to see the you don't want to see the long-term damage in people for short-term gains. So, let me ask you this, Adele, what are some, you've conquered so much this year already, but what are some things that you hope to accomplish by the time the year's over? Do you have any major goals on the horizon that you hope to accomplish by the time 2024 is over?
2024, I don't know. Like I definitely want to stay active for the rest of the year. I have no intention of slowing down. I want some super fights before the year is up. I think like I also have my eyes, like right now, my eyes are also set on the gi season. I do want to do the gi season. I do like my childhood dream when I first started jiu-jitsu was IBJJF gi world title, and that still holds a really special part in my journey. And I definitely want to conquer that one. But as like so this first year, just stay active. I think is the big thing for me.
That's excellent. That's awesome. And for everyone out there listening, by the way, Adele's in talks right now with getting an instructional filmed with us here at BJJ Fanatics. We don't quite know what it's going to be about yet, but for sure it's going to be good. So you guys keep your eyes peeled to the website, and keep your eyes peeled to our social media and her social media. So that way, once that's released, you guys will be able to pick that up. Well, folks, unfortunately, we're fresh out of time. Adele, it has really been a lot of fun talking with you here today. I appreciate you sharing your story. You've been someone very exciting to watch on the scene. And obviously, you're very young still, so you're just getting going. So it's going to be really cool to see how much more your career unfolds. And you're welcome back on the show anytime you'd like to come back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really enjoyable to just have a chat and share my perspective on some things and talk about some controversial things. I love getting some interesting questions, but I do appreciate you having me.
Of course. The pleasure was mine. For anyone out there that wants to keep up with Adele, it's real easy to do so. She's active on social media. It's all under her name. So if it's on Facebook, it's just her name. Instagram is Adele Fornarino, easy to find. YouTube channel possibly coming soon. Website possibly coming soon. So you guys keep an eye on her social media for those announcements. Right now, she is available for seminars, guys. So if you want to have her hosted at your academy for a seminar, reach out to her on Instagram and get that rolling. And then also, guys, again, keep your eyes peeled to bjjfanatics.com because we are in works getting a instructional with her filmed. So pay close attention for that to be released. And that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the BJJ Fanatics podcast.